Hello and welcome to the If We Knew Then podcast. I'm Stephen Socks.
And I'm Lori Socks.
And today we're joined by Lynette Louise, who specializes in neurofeedback.
A trigger warning, the R word is used in this episode. The conversation that you're going to hear is really transformative, and I think it was a beautiful hour that we spent with Lynette, because this was someone that we didn't know. And in reading about her, I found a version of the R word as a description of different definitions of autism.
We have given great consideration to releasing this episode. It wasn't a conversation we anticipated having, and once we found ourselves in it, we knew that the easiest way out would have been just to end it, and to be truthful, in our everyday life, we may just have done that, walked away. But we know this is part of the journey, at least right now it is.
We have strong feelings about the R word, mostly that it's old and tied to all the injustices of the time that it was born. When I hear the word, I think of the dehumanization and the injustices it carries on its shoulders. I think of the institutions and children denied life-saving surgeries because their life was not viewed as worthy. I think of the fight that I've had to fight for my child's education based on the weight that the word carried with school administration and the segregation it assisted in cultivating within a school population. I remember the psychologist that spoke it at one of Liam's first IEPs when it still had its place on the pages of the district's handbook. I think how that word planted seeds in a generation of people. I think of the grandma who approached me at the park when Liam was just an infant. She had that word on her tongue and told me that most people don't want those babies.
For listeners who are as sensitive to this word as we are, we apologize for the nature of the fight, or if this episode is upsetting to you in any way. But we ask that you see it through to the other side, because in our hearts, that's where the value lies.
It lies in the place where our humanity shines through, and in that, there is a connection among people with opposing views. A remembering that we are all connected, no matter how broken that connection can seem. There's even some healing and laughter, and a hope for progress and change.
So, our interview with Lynette Louise.
Hello, Lynette. Thank you for joining us here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor to have someone share their audience.
We got connected to you through somebody that just reached out to us that knew you. So I used that information and looked you up, and what a very interesting concept and work you're doing. And we were just kind of curious about it.
Yeah, we were curious about it. You call yourself the brain broad.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's got a little bit of oomph to it, right?
Yeah.
Initially, people were calling me the brain lady. They were trying to figure out what to call me. I wasn't a doctor yet. I was already working in brain rehab and doing it slightly differently and having better effect than most people, which I'm sure we all say, but I took footage so I could prove it anyway. So, and as I built that into more of a, let's make a website, let's get, we started asking each other, what should it be called? And if you look at my history and if you read about me, what you know is I've got a broad amount of experience. I've done all kinds of things, and I adopted many multiply handicapped children, raised 8 children, fought with the educational system and the doctors, even in college. I'm like, what are you talking about? That doesn't work. So I've been abroad often in my life, and I go abroad with my work. So it really was a fit, and we tossed it around and it really stuck.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I think I just did, but if you'd like it more linear,
Yeah, tell it, because you talked about that I did see on your website that you've worked in many different areas. Like you talk about working in abuse, you speak about autism, you speak about the different facilities of the brain, you talk about your different therapies that you bring into the household. So I'm just curious, like, where did all of this start and your interest in the brain, and more specifically working with children with autism?
Well, that happened more than an interest. It sort of happened. If I was to blame anyone, I'd have to blame Elvis Presley and the movie Change of Habit, where the nun, Mary Tyler Moore, and the doctor, Elvis Presley, decide to cure this hopelessly autistic child because she was abandoned. And so they hug her until she turns normal. That doesn't work. I tried it. It's not a good idea. But autism itself wasn't really the goal. I started out as a child of abuse. My mom was a teacher, respected in her town, but super, super, super physical and verbally abusive when I was a child. And I remember many times, sometimes I tell this long, sometimes short. I'm going to choose short today. I was just hiding in the bathroom while she's trying to break down the door, and I got my knees locked while I've got my feet against the door and my back against the wall. And I'm thinking, okay, remember how this feels. Remember how this feels. And make sure when you grow up, you save children. How many children am I going to have? I'm going to have 6, no, 8, no, 12, no, right? And that sort of evolved. But the mission and the decision to be making a difference in the lives of children was really born then. Once you have that direction in life, then things show up and they flavor it. And I'm a kid and I see Mary Tyler Moore, so I think maybe I'll be a nanny. And I see the singing nun, and I think maybe I'll be a nun who sings, because I also want to be an actress while I save the world. So, like any child, I had kind of a eclectic vision of how it should go, but it turned out I did most of it. So, except for the nun part. I did do, performing while I was helping the kids and stuff. So it was really born in my childhood. And I also had my own brain challenge, which was probably part of genetically passed on, because my mom was clearly not all there. So I had pixelated vision and different sensory things that were later historically diagnosed as possibly Asperger's. But I didn't know that going in. I didn't think I'll get autistic children. And even when I got children that I adopted that were multiply challenged and had autism wasn't the only thing. They had fetal alcohol syndrome. They were considered low IQ in the retarded range, Tourette's, different things, So autism was just sort of the common ground amongst us all.
So I want to go back and revisit the movie and the locking.
I love this. I love this. There's 2 people here, and one's going, no, you putting your hand down. No, you don't get to ask the question. I'm asking the question.
That was something else.
Okay, go.
No, I do want
to.
I am going to right now. I want to revisit the influence of the film and their beliefs, and also I want to go back. I want to really know why you had to. You kept telling yourself to remember this feeling, but I just want to stop right there, because one thing I was going to not talk about this for a while. You just used the word retarded, and on your website you have retardation. It's a big part of your explanation. And it's really a word that's being taken out of society because of its detriment. I mean, I know that it's a clinical word, that I know where it was born. I know what it means. I know it's medical. But it's really, I think that was, I'm so interested in all the stuff you do, but I was so stopped in my tracks by the liberal use of the word retardation. And I wanted to talk about that, because that is a word, and you just use it right here about it's not a word we use. It's a word that's very damning.
I've actually never used it on the podcast. I've actually said that before.
No, and actually I think this is something that we'll keep in, because I know that our families, it's a challenge. And I know, like, my daughter, whenever she hears it at school, she's like, she has to fight because she has to decide if she's going to say something about it. And I know that the families in our community, It's something that really hurts because it's fueled with so many limits and archaic beliefs. And it actually is at the heart of a lot of the limitations and injustice that our children have to fight to overcome. So, that being said, I'm going to ask you why you use that word still.
Well, you've clearly shared your opinion, so now I'll share mine. First of all, I try to stick to the accuracy of the history. Otherwise, you get lost in rewriting history, and we have this battle all the time everywhere. So when my children were diagnosed, they were diagnosed. I actually softened it the way I said it. They were diagnosed as one as educatably retarded and another as uneducatably retarded.
So, Lynette, I'm going to stop you right there because I am very interested to hear about changing your brain in that. But when you talk about, I use it because it's historically accurate. Historically, our children were taken away and put into institutions.
True.
True.
So,
and to rewrite that history is to say, hey, we know more now. These lives have a value. And so I don't think it's rewriting history. I think it's when you know better, you do better. There's a lot of words that are no longer in our vocabulary because they do come from ignorance and they're hurtful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I've certainly thought it all through. And I certainly have a lot more to say if you'll let me say it. If you'll let me. But I'll try.
Well, I'm going to try too.
Okay, so bite your tongue for a second and let me say it.
But I just have to let you know that just because I do respect you as a human, but that doesn't...
you don't know me yet. You don't have to respect me just on face value.
No, I respect all
so.
humans, and I think we do respect each other. And I don't know, that's just who we are. So I'm not going to bite my tongue because I don't think that really helps anyone. But
okay.
I'm curious as to, you have raised children with autism, why it is that you continue to use this word that's very damning and hurtful.
I don't think the word is damning and hurtful, for starters. So we're coming from a different belief system.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't hurt you.
Well, remember, I do have these kids, and I was different too.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the people who use the word in a way that is damning and hurtful are damning and hurtful. I do think that I had to find a way to help my children be comfortable with the things coming their way. And I do think that using the term that was used on their diagnostic papers, so that when somebody goes, are you sure? Did they really have all that? How is it possible that they are now not anymore? I can pull out the papers and say, here they are. But if I start changing the words, that's probably not useful. I do think that having my son one day, in fact, I wrote an article about this called Reality Retarded, because we were sitting at McDonald's and he was considered possibly educatably retarded. Fetal alcohol syndrome often lowers the IQ. Not a surprise. He was classically autistic. He had Tourette's syndrome.
So if you'll just do me a favor, if you're going to continue to use the word, if you can just say the R word, because it is something that I don't feel like...
Well, I'll stop using it if you stop making me keep explaining it. It's almost over. It's really you that's stuck here, not me. And I don't even have to do this. It's fine.
You're right.
But I'm going to give you my honest truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So anyway, so he's sitting there and I'm explaining something, again, social for him, because social things were such a challenge. And I think, if I remember correctly, it had to do with the person that had waited on us being a little bit abrupt with him and impatient with his stutter, and me talking about, well, you never know what was going on for them. Maybe they have their own issues with, hearing or comprehending or all these things. Anyway, we're sitting in the McDonald's parking lot and just chatting about it. And it was just the most beautiful moment to me. And here it comes, the last time. He just turned to me and said,
if you'll say our word, I'll appreciate it.
Well, and he said, Mom, I think I used to be reality retarded. And I thought it was a great culmination of teachings in his life, that he was able to go, here I was, someone who couldn't understand things. Here I am now, someone who's understanding social things. Here I am able to use a word that used to be thrown at me, but we got comfortable in our home with so that everyone would be comfortable. And I feel like it's a past tense. So for me, this was a celebration moment. And if I were to get stuck, like you're stuck right now on this one concept, this word that's in the way of all these great conceptual sharings that I'm giving you, and even your face is all frustrated, it's like, that's my problem with that kind of progress. I do believe we need to care about this stuff. I think we need to care about it in our soul. But at the same time, the truth still exists. My son still existed through the bullies, through the life story. And I still had to, my sons, get them to a place of absolute comfort. And I still had to be able to look at this word and pain it. I can't think of it, take this explosive target out of it and make it a thing that some people use this word this way, some people use this word that way. Musicians mean play slower. It's just a word. Now, to give it a little more background, I raised my kids while doing stand-up comedy.
So Lynette, I just want to go back to it's just a word because
you're stuck, not me. I'm not the one. It's you. I'll do it all day if you want, but it's you.
I understand.
I think if you can see of anything, if you're fine with the word, you can at least agree that a very negative part of the word is it blunts conversation.
Well, that it does what's happening right now, yeah.
And it blunts communication. At least your communication of the good stuff you want to say will not be heard to a lot of people.
And I think there's like an insensitivity if you know that it's Lori
even
word.
said,
I've asked
please don't say it again. You go, and you say it again. It shows insensitivity.
It does. And
it shows I'm doing whatever I want to do.
But I just want to say that because you talk about
I'm not the one making the conversation continue.
Right. I just want to say
you guys are so funny. I'm not insensitive to it. You can see me on a documentary crying about it. No, I'm not insensitive. I just think that you have to be aware. In fact, I love what's happening right now. I think we're having a chance to have this conversation because I used it.
Yeah, because I think it's a really important conversation. And, you talk about the word and it's there and it has power and and I get that because when our child, we don't use certain words in the house at all that demean or, we don't use fat, we don't use stupid, we don't use any of those words. And when our daughter went to school and at some point in the 5th grade, someone called her stupid and it hit really hard because that word had more weight to it. And that's not, but that's not really what we're talking about here. It's about taking a word that literally, it's actually being taken out of medical books because it's an inappropriate word to be used. And the way that it's usually used, because it's no longer a medical term that's used. I mean, you can find like really old doctors that still use it or narrow-minded doctors that still use it. So because now even the medical community who usually are the last ones to kind of change things that work. They're eliminating it. The school system, they've taken it out of the vocabulary. So
and a way majority has agreed that word is offensive.
I mean, there's like whole big campaigns about that's an offensive word that really limits humans, like the N word, like the G, like so many words that are just like thrown out. And I get like, oh, okay, well, how my kids have this, so I can use it. And it's still being out there. But you have to, like, do you realize that by keeping that word in circulation, you propagate the use and it opens the door still for people who should not, that are not affected to use it?
Belief. I know it's your belief. It's not mine.
I know that. I can tell. Totally.
I believe very much that I'm doing the opposite. I believe very much. And if you'd let me say it, and maybe someone will hear it, maybe even you.
Here's the question is because this is the only reason I had this conversation, because after reading that, I was like, I don't think I want to do this. But what I read on your website was you talk about, and I'll get the exact verbiage that you use. You say labels are an invention of medical science, and as such, not an impenetrable statement of fact.
Sure.
So wait, so you said that,
And I believe
so I was
it.
like, well, you know what? Maybe somebody else builds her website, and she doesn't realize that her definition of autism is retardation. My husband watched a video, and you talk about Down syndrome being a brain disorder, which is not. It's a natural occurring chromosomal arrangement. And so there's part of me that can say, I don't want to talk to this person. And there's part of me that can say, hey, look, you see things differently than I do. Your verbiage is putting out that false information about Down syndrome, and also using a word that is very limiting as far as, I mean, it's just a word that isn't used. There's so many campaigns, and there's a part of me that says you're a human, and you have whatever your life is, and it seems like you have a good, like that you want to change things, and that's why I'm curious, because I'm going to tell you one more time, it's really damning and hurtful, and it's not to you, but I'm telling you. That it's damning and hurtful.
You know what? There's many, many people in the world. I'm not really sure what you want from this interview. Certainly not my information. That's unfortunate. I have a lot.
No, we did. That's you. But I'm just curious, because you have this stuff, but then there's this
thing that really rubs you, apparently.
You know what rubbed me the most, because I hear the R word, and I'll say, oh, that bothers me, even if it's just I'm the only person in the world. Just the fact that the person I asked that of says, well, I'm going to say it again
and again
and get ready. And that's the hurtful part.
So that isn't actually how this interview went. When you replay it, you'll hear you're just fighting me, and that's okay. If you want, I love to share. You're right. Down syndrome is a chromosome situation, but it results in a disordered brain. It results in dysfunction. It results in challenges. If it didn't, it wouldn't even be a thing that we try to work with and help people with.
But honestly, there's a lot of things with Down syndrome that are things that are based in inaccuracies and misperceptions.
With everything, there's not a single brain challenge. There's nothing that doesn't have all this controversy around it.
And I guess what I'm excited about is here you are, one of those people who put the information out that I'm like, how does that information even get out there? Because it's not my experience. And I get a chance to talk to you. And I'm not afraid to talk to you.
Okay.
I'm like, where does that information come from? Like where, and I'm, using the R word in the description of autism, and not caring that, because there's other terms.
I've never done that, by the way.
It's on your website, the retardation under each, like under your what is autism page. It's under each explanation as for what autism is.
I think you're mixing together some of my stuff, but that's
no,
okay.
No, I can put it's on your website unless you take it down, which would be great.
But I'm not going to take it down.
So but no, I'm not. I'm just curious, because as a mother of a child with Down syndrome,
I don't believe you're curious. I think you're just mad.
Do I look mad?
I think you're just offended, and I'm not sure what you want from me. You know what? There's so many people in the world, and there's this nugget full of people that are really helped by the way I do it, and I only need to help them. And the people that are offended and perceived differently, they'll find someone else. I can't help everybody, but I am motivated to help. And that is why. And I may come at it differently than you, and I may look at it differently than you, and my explanations may rub against you, but then you're not my client. You already went off of my website, and somebody else went, oh my gosh, I'm coping with that. And they found me. And that's the way it should be.
What do you mean we went off of your website?
That we read it and then didn't.
Right. Somebody who's searching for someone, right? And they see it and they go, oh, I can't believe she used that word. And they don't want to deal with me. They've moved along. So the people that want someone who speaks like I speak, who talks like I talk, who's worked, personally with their own children and then works with families and does it in this different way, they find me. And they find me because I'm honestly representing myself. And if I change to be PC the way you want, then I won't be honestly representing myself and they won't find me and I won't be able to help them. And I'll probably be a watered down version for the ones who do, because it won't represent what I bring to the table. So I'm sorry that you're so offended, but then you should have moved on and not had me as a guest, or else we can keep fighting. It's fine. I don't care either way.
I don't feel like I'm fighting with you. I feel like you're saying that the one word that's on your website, that's the one thing that is hurtful to our community, that might be what makes people go, oh gosh, and turn away. But why, since there's so many other words to choose from, that you would...
I don't actually think it's hurtful to your community.
Oh, it is.
We have a different belief system right here, right? We're operating from a different place and you would not have hired me.
Can I ask you, I want to know why, with all the information that's out there, with the word being eliminated and all the campaigns from our community, but also from the world, why would you think that it's not hurtful when that's the message that is clearly being sent?
I truly think that it matters very, very, very much what I said in the beginning, that we include, I'm 65. I mean, like, this doesn't matter to me. I'm retired. I'm just sharing. I think it matters very much that we include truths along the way in the shape that they were in. For example, at that time, they thought that autism was caused by refrigerator mothers. Well, that turned out to be ridiculous. But I would always talk about it if I was telling the story of adopting my children and finding out they were locked in closets and things like that, and feeling like, oh, as soon as I warm them up with some love and give them holding therapy like Elvis Presley did in the movie, they'll pop out of this strange brain condition and be normalized. If I were to talk in present tense only, it eliminates the entire story. It undoes the progress. It makes it impossible to tell the truth. I'm sorry. I think it's part of it. I also think very much that it's important not to get stuck in the way that you're all stuck right now. Like, I think words should be exactly what they are, because you can really hurt someone with the word pretty. You can really hurt them with the word rich. You can really hurt somebody with the word you and your big hair. It's how you treat people that I want to talk about. And I think it's a great opportunity to be an expert in the world and be able to say, I'm going to show you love and kindness. I'm going to be easygoing and happy no matter what you throw my way. And I'm not going to let words be the problem. So that's who I am and what I bring to the table. And if that's not good for you, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, if I thought calling you pretty or that you had big hair hurts you,
I wouldn't do it. And also, I want to say, because
I didn't call you the R word.
Well, listen, I want to say...
No, you didn't call me the
right?
R word, no.
I want to say that, because you say that to be stuck, right? But do you realize holding on to the past is stuck?
I don't hold on to the past. I'm talking about the
story.
But
you said about holding on to the past, of like using this word is in the past.
And again, I never said holding, I said representing.
Okay, or using this word, not letting go and not having the change because you think the past is so important.
I do not use the word in present tense when I'm talking about people in present tense.
But your website is present tense, and I don't think it undoes I think it undoes the damage, not the progress for you to move on. So to not use a word from the past, whatever it is, to not use that because we've learned that it's hurtful or bad or even inaccurate and wrong, that doesn't mean that the fact of all of that information isn't there anymore. But what it does is it allows you to then focus on the present moment and not hold on to the past. And so I don't think it undoes the damage of that word by evolving.
So if I were taking the stage, and I was going to do a talk, I doubt I'd use the word. And it isn't because I'm afraid of the word. is because it would do this. It would bring all this forward.
Mm-hmm.
This began with me explaining my children. And at the time, that's how they were diagnosed. And I don't shy from that story. I'm not going to shy from anything in their story.
Yeah.
I'm not going to rewrite their story. And then it turned into this discussion for a reason. It has to do with how it affects you. Now, that's how I honor the change in the world. Now, I might, while on stage, if I talk about my children, I would then use the word and say, and at that time, that was the official diagnosis. And again, I'm not going to shy away from it. And I'm proud of much of what they've learned to deal with. You know, we're also multiracial. So, you know, we've had to deal with all the things that come with, you know, moving from, for example, I wrote a book that I haven't published yet called My Brother Was an Indian. Well, that's considered negative now. But that's what he was when we adopted him. That's what we thought. And so the progress and the change and the way we were affected is integral and tied into that. Do I call people that now, today? No. But when we adopted him, yes, my goodness, that was it. And so, and along with that came all of these behaviors on our part, thoughts on our, like my mom thinking if she dressed him up in a Fortrell suit, he'd turn white. Like there were all these racially crazy things that came as a result of us perceiving it in a certain way. It was never the word though. It was always what we thought that stuff meant. So yeah, in our family, now that we have, you know, Blacks and Arabs and whites and Asians, and we play with all this stuff in the house so that it is desensitized and everybody's comfortable with all of these things. And they are. Do they use them on people? Never. Against people? Never.
Lynette, so the way you came at me judging that, oh, you're angry, you're stuck and all of that, I just want to let you know that I think most people would walk away, but that's not who I am. Because it's very defensive. And I would have stopped and I wouldn't have gotten to this part of your conversation, which maybe is more truth than that. This is my word. This is what I'm using. You are stuck. You're the reason. You're not my community.
I actually never talked to you like that, honey.
Okay. Well, that's how it sounded on my end. And as we all know, it's just perception is, you know, the reflection of who you are. So that's how it came across. And those were some of the words I felt like that's what I heard. And I'm so glad that you don't think that's what you said. But what you just said about, you know, if you were on stage, you would tell it as this is part of his story and this is what it was called. Absolutely. Because I think the value of that's what we talk about. When my son was first born, there was a woman in the craft store and she was like, and she used the word because that's what she was told. And I think that is important as we progress and grow and have a voice and make change. I think that is so important because we remember that, hey, our kids were put in institutions. Our kids still are fighting for an education, but even more so. They didn't even have a right to fight for their education. Right. They didn't have a place in the classroom. They, you know, and you talk about that the words that you said, that you thought that they created behaviors as a result. Mm-hmm. And of perceiving it a certain way. And that is what I'm trying to say is that what you experienced, which is no longer because we've grown, because we've become diverse, because, you know, people care, because there's change, because people have voices. So all of that stuff that you had to go through, the R word, the N word, the I word, every word that you had to get through to do the good that you're doing, giving, you know, kids a home and love, which is really the only thing that matters in this journey is love. And when things are done out of love. So you had to go through all of that. And those words, you know, they're no longer used in society for a reason. And if they are, I just watched a video of of a couple getting into an Uber using the word, and you know, they're
the N word, yeah.
You know, and it's just not acceptable anymore. And I think that was my question to you, because I do feel like you have a good heart and you do this good work, but the word is all over the place. And even in your video about Down syndrome. And sometimes we do it because we don't know or we don't realize or whatever it is. And I think that's why I was so open to having this conversation, because I know I can't change anybody's mind. And anybody who believes certain things and certain things are acceptable, I don't even have that conversation. I'll just walk away, or I'll say, I don't use that word, and I walk away, because I'm not changing anybody's mind. What I do is I change my community and I advocate for my community, and I'll at least verbalize that, I don't use that word and that word is hurtful. And then whatever, it's not, I just walk away. But I looked at your website and it appears that you care about, especially in the past, being 65, I know that you probably experienced a whole different realm of what was acceptable. And you have to make.
Oh, yeah. And I had to change as I went too.
And you make that change. And so that's why it wasn't for any other reason, but I saw that you did good. And then I saw that this word was there, and I wasn't going to say until we got further on when the subject came up about labels. I wasn't going to say anything, but then you use it so freely. And I just have to say, and you may never change, and the word may remain on your website, and you may continue to use it, but it hurts. And it hurts the community. And my son it hurts my daughter, who's neurotypical. And I just had this conversation with her the other day that a kid that used it said, well, I'm allowed to because I have experience with it. And it's like, well, like you said, like you use it in your home, that's okay. But you can't just use it because you hurt other people, And I was telling her, well, like maybe it's okay in his home and you don't know why they use it in their home. So we just have to say, you said your piece, and you don't know. It's the reason why it affects you is because we know that it's hurtful and it's not used in your home or in, we actively try to eliminate it.
So do you want me to respond, or do you want to let that be the last word on it? Because I'm happy to respond, but it'll just probably start it up again.
I just wanted to hear why. And I think you really, like the message and the fact that you use it and when you tell it, I think that's right on par with like not forgetting what you've come through. That's it. And I think that you try to make a difference and change the world in a good way.
I really believe that I just myself don't want to get caught up not saying things because we're being so careful. I also really want to teach the difference between the intention behind a word and the word. Like when my kids would be yelled at and called the R word, then it was hurtful. But when somebody very kindly said, well, is he, okay, it's very weird for me to dance around it and say R word, but okay.
I appreciate it. I totally appreciate it.
Right. But if they do it in this very sweet, well, is he R word? I would say, well, yeah, that's what he was diagnosed, but we're literally working on that. And I never saw that as a thing that couldn't be changed. I also was smart enough to look around the world and go, where is the IQ a little lower so we can move there and my kids will fit in better? Like I took this and opened it up. And I think opening it up is the way to end up with the end of the story that I have, which is, one of them is a helicopter mechanic, has been 20 years in the service and is going to re-up and been overseas a couple times. Another one's been on a second career. This time he's a welder, and they have houses and children and wives. And, one's the quirky guy in town because he was more challenged. But they've all managed to do really well, with the exception of the boy I mentioned who was locked in a closet for a couple of years. He'll probably always be my best friend buddy that travels with me everywhere. And in all cases, this opening up of the mind and this looking to what will work rather than what's this horrible thing. I just avoided fights. I would duck and weave. If the school wasn't serving them well, I didn't fight the school for very long. I fought. And then I went, okay, this isn't working and it's hurting my kids. They're getting lost in the fight. This world of special ed It's a lot like a domestic abuse situation where you got this violence going on between two adults and they're fighting and fighting. Even in the autism world itself, you know, you'll have little things like vaccines, no vaccines, or facilitation versus RPM, and everybody gets fighting so hard for their position and they lose the kids. Years go by in this fight, years. I remember, speaking of Down syndrome, there was a young girl who had Down syndrome when my kids were really little, and the parents fought and fought and fought to get her embraced into the school system like everyone else. And I read it, and it was the story of success. You know, they were accepting her in, and back then you weren't, right? You were shuttled off somewhere. And so it was this great story of the difference they'd made. And I thought, okay, I'm making that difference later when the kids are older, because they just spent 5 years doing that. 5 years of that child's life is a lot of time.
It's a lot. When we just left the school that we left because we were fighting, that was one of the things. I said, nobody should have to cry over elementary school.
Duh.
No parent should feel like, you shouldn't feel like you are being mentally abused by an elementary school. You shouldn't feel, you shouldn't beg for your child's education, but you're meant to. You shouldn't, and those things. And you said that you gave up the fight, like you decided to do it later. We just learned that lesson. Like we just got through 8 years of what was a fight. Now, we were very fortunate that we had a lawyer. We didn't go on summer vacations, but we hired a lawyer every year for our IEP. And because of that presence, which is so just absolutely
gross.
Yes, that we had to have a lawyer to ensure something that, you know, people fought for so long ago, for our child's placement in the classroom. We were fortunate that Liam did have a place in the classroom. It didn't stop that we had to educate our child, that we had to be on top of people doing our jobs. And I don't know about you, but I've never had a job that if I failed so flagrantly that I would continue to keep my job, which was frustrating, right? So we just got to that place where he has an inclusive environment, and the feeling of not fighting is a gift.
Right.
You say, which on your website, which I completely agree with, is that a parent has so much, and I'll try to find it exactly, but basically you say that as parents, we have the real input in our child's life, which is something that
and
really
maybe the commitment for life. So we're lifers, right?
Yeah, but we
Could
have,
be,
I think
yeah.
we have the love. I think we have the commitment. I think we're the ones who believe in our child. Every so often we come, like we have a great school right now and they all believe in our son. But before that, every so often someone would come along and it was such a gift, but we realized very early on that it was about our place in his life, our advocacy, our being a voice before he has his voice.
Right.
But you're right as far as just that journey. Like every parent has a journey, and they're all different. Every parent, not just
everyone,
every
not
person.
Just
every person has a journey, and and everybody's story is very important. You talk about coming from abuse and how that really made you want to fight for kids and make a change. I think that's so.
At that moment at the door with your knees locked, holding the door closed.
Yeah.
You know, how do I stop this from happening to other kids?
Yeah.
You know, how do I
think that's why we do
I'm
it.
protecting myself at this moment for this instant, but how can I make sure that a kid doesn't have to fight for themselves like that?
And I'll be, you know, when you talk about abuse, there are certain things that you believe about yourself. There's certain things that people tell you, and it takes a long time to stop believing what they said.
Oh, for sure.
Some words might set heavy, and then maybe it's I didn't let that word get me down. I'm not going to let words inhibit people I love. Maybe that's a part of a journey.
Well, I think it was more things like having people say things like that to my children, but having already accepted their diagnosis as something I should help work from. So they didn't sound like the same word to me. They just didn't, and they aren't. It's really about how they're used. And I still believe that you should remove and change and address stuff as we move forward. We wouldn't have gender equality and things like that. But I also think it's super, super, super important to stay aware of the multifaceted nature of this, different cultures. I traveled the world, and sometimes words are like the C word is a favorite slang term in like England and Ireland. So that's another exposure I have, is I'm always exposed to the constant difference. And words are just words. All these different languages, when you speak many languages, they're just sounds that you use to either hurt or not hurt, to help or not help. It becomes something else.
And you're right about intention. Some words are more hurtful, and when we know how they make others feel, we stop using those words.
It is the intention, and part of that is like you understanding that in this conversation with us, that the R word bothered us, like it may a lot of people, and then you did, and it was you
and it's
even admitted that
uncomfortable
it
for you.
wasn't
But you know what? It's
comfortable, but you
uncomfortable
made-
for you, but we appreciate it.
Oh, I totally appreciate it. Like, and
Because
I know
it
it's an effort. I think that's part of it, is that the effort is there for somebody. Like if I go to open a door for somebody, it shows an effort that I'm going to help somebody, or if they have a bunch of packages or something. And I think that that's appreciated.
And if they say, you don't have to open my door because that makes them feel a certain way.
Oh yeah, well I wouldn't open it then.
Because that
Yeah.
happened to you and you were like,
Oh, yeah.
sorry.
I was in an elevator actually, and a lot of times, growing up in the South, a gentleman would, always let a woman out of the elevator first.
Right.
But I could totally see how that could be a bit creepy.
But it's also scary. For
It
like,
could be
I never
scary.
thought about that before, because now you have someone
now
behind
a man
you.
is behind you,
Right.
and you don't know, you can't see them. So once I understood that, I went, yeah, I'm out of here. Yeah, no problem. That doesn't,
And
because
it's also much bigger than that. I remember when I was in Lebanon one time, when I first got there, and I didn't know the money or how the exchange worked, and they just really, really want to carry my bags, but I'm really afraid I don't know how to tip. And I'm like, no, leave my bags alone. Let me do it. But every time I would have an experience like that, I'd realize, oh my God, there's so much more to all of this than my life taught me. And over and over and over again, we just don't know each person's story. We don't know their culture. We don't know. It's one of the reasons that the show that I make, Fix It in 5, its intention is to show at least 5 different cultures, because it's so certain nuggets stay the same regardless of your culture, regardless of your belief systems, your religion, your ethnicity, any of that stuff. And those are the things that I want to show work every time, like the neurofeedback that I use for brain change, the addressing the behavior in the moment and helping the person to respond in the moment, the way that you do that in a playful fashion, so it doesn't feel like you're being put down, all kinds of things. So I was motivated to do this, and I pay for it all. I don't make a cent, but it's this give back feeling of nobody has had the chance to, like you said, every parent, that one fight with your child or whatever. I had 8. So I had to go, oh my gosh, this school is fantastic for Dar and it sucks for everyone else. We have to leave. I have to take from Dar what he finally got in order to give to the others. And that kept happening over and over again. There were too many exceptional stories to fit it all. And maybe that was the blessing, because I just kept going, okay, not this school. Okay, not this group, right? And then finally I went, wait a minute, I can do this. And I homeschooled, and I just went for the nuggets, the stuff that really mattered. And I got funding, and yes, I had to work. I was a stand-up comedian, and I was an actress, and I had a TV show, and men didn't really want to pay my bills. So, and they were a lot. My kids were a lot to handle, so people ran from it. And that was a blessing too. It gave me clear sight to what actually worked. And that's the give back I want to do. And I guess it's part of this thing about not getting lost in whether or not you're covering your ankles or your arms, or if your whole face shows, if your hair can show, if you use this word or that word. In the end, what really helped my kids was, yes, neurofeedback. It was really a game changer, really a game changer, and my brain as well. But it was really just looking at them as who they are, knowing they could learn the next thing. And what's the next thing? In each of them, that was a different template. and everybody trying to put a template on them because of their diagnosis or what they believed they were, or because of their race or what, right? Everybody who was doing that was harming them. So I don't think it's the word. I think it's the stuff you believe because of it. And I can't.
No, you're right.
Thank you enough actually for the conversation. And maybe I will have to go through. It's been a long time I've been putting stuff up. Maybe some of it's old enough that it's no longer relevant or useful.
Yeah, because what you just said about, do I cover my ankles or my face or everything? And I think, unfortunately, we're talking about the R word here, that might dissuade people from really finding this information. Do you know? And that's the unfortunate part, because
they probably wouldn't want to learn from me anyway, though.
No, that's not true. I think it limits what you think, people who are hurt by a word, they're not hurt by the word. They're hurt by everything it is. Like you just said, everything it carries with it. And I think there's so many other options. And honestly, I thought it was so cool because you had these things that worked, and then you have that biofeedback. So it's almost, it is a visualization of them seeing what's happening. And I think that's so empowering. I thought it was very interesting. So to say that people who are offended by the R word wouldn't be interested in what you do is kind of limiting and judging us people who don't like the R word, because
I don't think it's true to say that I don't think they'd be interested. I do think they'd be interested. I think there's a lot of practitioners that use neurofeedback.
No.
I think there's a lot of people putting stuff up. And so I think it's really important to.
You're the first neurofeedback person.
I didn't even know about it.
No, we didn't even know.
Oh my gosh, when I found out about it, so my son, the one who's still minimally verbal, when I found out about it, it took so long for me to get over the fact that it was invented before I adopted him, because he was in his 20s and I got my first full hand on the back hug as a result. Like these small things that I could have got way back then, and we could have had this great trajectory of change over the years, right? But there's no point in that. That doesn't help you be strong if you sit around and feel bad about those things. So you just let it go.
You let the past go,
right?
And
you won't
be in the present moment.
Yeah. Neurofeedback is brilliant. It's a way of teaching the brain how to operate differently. It's not intrusive. You're not putting wires into the brain or electricity. And there's all that available too. And I'm not dissing it. I think they're all good therapies. I won't do them. I don't like intrusive things. So I love teaching. I love the concept of neurofeedback, that I can teach to the brainwave, to the behavior of the brain itself before it turns into a behavior or an emotion in the person. And that hooked me right from the get-go and changed everything for us.
Because you will actually, with electrodes, you'll be able to show the patient or the person what's happening in their brain.
Yeah, okay, so that was so fun for me because I got in so much trouble for saying electrodes, because they are electrodes, by the way.
Oh, is that wrong?
But we're not allowed to say it anymore because it scares people.
You know what? I won't say it. You tell me not to
No,
say
it doesn't
electrodes.
bother me. I'm just saying how fun it is to stumble across a word that kind of bookends.
The E word.
Yeah, so we're supposed to call them sensors. It's not as scary.
Yeah, I guess using electrodes, people would call back to shock therapy. So
yeah,
so
and especially
you see,
someone who's
it
scared.
totally bookends, Lynette. That's like we're taking something from the past,
Right.
we're changing the word so that we can go forward in progress.
But then we have to rewrite the dictionary because actually sensor's inaccurate, but it's what they want us to use. So that's what we're using. So yeah, you're looking at the brainwave behavior. Now, the average person would need a lot of training to understand what they're looking at, right? So that's not really very relevant for a lot of people. Now, I myself demystify everything. So in example here, a lot of the times you'll go to a clinic and they'll say, you have to focus, you have to play this game, you're playing with your brain and all this. And if you don't focus and you don't know what the other person's doing. So you're giving up your power to the clinician who's pushing the buttons and has all the knowledge. I actually do this in homes and teach parents how to do it. And I show them the brain waves instead. And I use the game too with the kids, but I also show the kids the brain waves. And I say, so here you're making too many of these. And when you make so many of these, it's hard for you to talk, because that sensor is here on the part of your brain that's hooked to the way you're going to make your tongue move. So we're going to get you to make less of these. Do you want to play the game, or do you want to look here? What's interesting is I'd say 4% of people choose the game, even though it's more fun, right? They want to actually see.
Yeah.
And they check their numbers and they watch to see, is it improving? And I also don't make them focus on it. I just tell them about it and say, because that's a lie. It's not necessary. It's an auditory feedback system for the most part. You do have a visual component.
It looks very empowering to be able to see, because I feel like a lot of times that's what gets us, is that we feel like we have no power, or,
right.
That this is happening to us, but it's not. It's that we are participants. And I think that you also talk about it's good for ADHD and depression and so many other things that are our brain. And people forget that we control how we respond to our brain, and we have the power. It takes a lot of work, but that's what meditation is controlling your thoughts. So I can see how empowering that must feel, not only
help guide somebody into that.
Because it's not like, oh, this just happens to me.
Right.
And I feel like it's not only empowering to whoever is your patient, but also to their caregiver.
Well, I have to say this conversation has been very enlightening. It's been very interesting too.
And you didn't go turn me off.
No,
we don't turn people off, Lynette. No matter how much you wanted us to turn you off.
I was so interested in what you do, and also interested once we got into the conversation of what your thoughts were, and then we came to a place, and it became a conversation. This should be able to teach people that there's different views, and at the end of the day, we still have our views. Our same
we
views,
still don't like the
but
R word.
I can know more about you. I even saw you react to us and say, for you, I'll do this.
Maybe I'll look at my website and see.
Yeah, right. Like something, update the website or whatever. And when early on we had said Lori said we respect you as a human, and that is something we need to do.
I don't think people have to earn being respected as a human. I think if we all just loved and respected each other, they can lose the respect.
Yeah, that's actually how I go about it too.
Yeah, I think that it was you as just a human, and it looks like you do good things, and you have a good intention. And that was the only reason I was willing to sit down, because I know that, and for the most part, when people do use that word, they're not interested in changing, because that's just how it is.
No, I know.
But it's true. Like the word has the power of the past, but the past is limits, and we go forward and we move forward in whatever and make those changes. And once we know better, we do better, and we can let go and progress as humanity, as caregivers, as advocates, whatever path we're on. And I'm so happy that we pushed through the challenge of this conversation.
I think we said some really important stuff, actually. And I think it was really, really feisty and fun.
I think you're probably feisty, Lynette.
I'm a little feisty. I'm the brain broad.
I think the fact you used broad in 2020.
I think that was a warning right at the beginning.
I'm just really happy that we continued the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Please follow us on Twitter at If We Knew Then Pod, and you can drop us a line on our Facebook page at If We Knew Then Pod, or visit our website, ifweknewthen.com, to send us an email with questions and comments. And you can join our mailing list there and get alerts of future podcast episodes. All these links will be added to this episode's show notes. Thank you again, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode of If We Knew Then.
Thank you.